We're going to go to line 2 and talk to Jay. Jay, how are you?
Not bad. How you doing, Daryl?
Good. Now listen, I wanted to get a little geologist. There's been so much in the news recently about fracking, about all sides, and I did want to touch bases with you who would have some indication just to let people know a little bit about what it is all about. Tell me how it's done.
Sure, I can do that. First of all, I'll let you know that I am a geologist, not an engineer, so there might be some differences of opinion, but I can give you, my take on it. First of all, we have no idea, even if we have a resource on the West Coast, that we can't even frack. So the first step that we really have to do is to drill some conventional wells, and to do some due diligence and some research to see what those rocks actually hold and to see if we have a resource. And then before we even talk about fracking, I think it'd be really important for the provincial government, to legislate a regional groundwater study, because, the biggest threat that people are talking about is the pollution of the groundwater, right? So, and one thing that they've learned in the U.S. is that before all the fracking started, there was no baseline for the basic chemistry of the groundwater. So when they started taking samples of the groundwater after the drilling had taken place, they had no real baseline to compare their data to. So you need to know what the chemistry of that groundwater is before you go ahead and drill your wells and frack them. Because then, go ahead.
Good. No, you guys, sorry.
No, because then you can tell if there had been any contamination, from the fracking process, because you knew what it was before you started.
Well, that makes perfect sense to me. So tell me, the oil is trapped in between the layers of rock underground, pretty far down, isn't it?
Yeah, it depends on the reservoir, but I think, say, over in the Green Point Shale in Western Newfoundland, I think you're probably looking at maybe 2 kilometers underground.
Amazing.
And yeah, it is, it really is. And if you look at the basics of how a well is drilled, the first phase of drilling is what you call the surface hole. So this part of the hole is designed to drill to a certain depth that'll get you through the gravel and into bedrock and below the groundwater table. So once that hole is drilled, you run in what you call casing. Like when you see an artesian well drilled, you'll see a steel tube just hanging up out of the ground. So basically, you run in that casing, and then you mix cement on surface, and you pump that cement down the inside of the casing, and then it comes up the outside of the casing, in between the wellbore and the casing, and it's supposed to create an impermeable seal that isolates that wellbore from any fluids leaking. So that's really your first defense of protecting your groundwater, is to have a proper casing and cement job done on your surface hole. Now, something that isn't common practice in the oil patch, I know out west it wasn't, is that you can do a test after the casing is cemented. You can do a test that it's called a cement bond log. So basically, you run this specialized tool that runs on a wire line and a drum, and you run that tool in the hole, and it runs on sonic velocity, and it transmits sound waves from the inside of that casing, and it transmits through the casing into the cement, and you can detect whether or not you have a cement seal from top to bottom. So that's something that isn't standard practice within the oil patch, but it could be something that could be implemented, to make sure that casing is cemented correctly.
Well, that sounds like a great point, because really it can be done safely. It's faults in the system, and basically it is the fault of the cement and how it's poured, and the connection at the very end, which is going to decide if it's going to leak or if it's going to be correctly sealed.
Yes, and it's really important that cement is mixed properly, that the conditions on surface are right. Temperature can affect it, and human error can have an impact on it. And it's really important that it's mixed and pumped correctly, and it migrates all the way from top to bottom, creating that seal, so that you're essentially you want it to be a closed system. You don't want to have any weaknesses within that cement that can hurt you in the future. So I'll go on a little bit more, and then say after surface casing, you drill, usually directionally drill. So because a lot of the fracking jobs now, especially the multi-stage fracking, the type of fracking that's making all the news, it's done in a horizontal wellbore. So the next stage is you directionally drill and you reach your target, your reservoir, and you run. Then there's another stage where you run another casing string and you cement that casing again. And that casing usually extends up into the surface casing, X number of meters. And then that casing is also cemented there. So here's another point where you can do that cement bond log. Conventional evaluation will only allow you to run those tools so far into the hole because of the angle. But you can run those tools, and you can again evaluate how good that cement job is in the intermediate casing.
So that's that's very interesting. So you, as a geologist, it's hard to have the engineering hat on, but it seems like most of the problems associated with fracking fall on the engineering side. As a geologist, what do you think about the process?
Well, my whole viewpoint is that there's two places where our groundwater can be impacted, and that's on surface where all of the frac fluids are stored, and downhole. When you pump those fluids downhole, if there is any loss of your well integrity, especially after you frack these wells, because the well bores they're subjected to really high pressures, and it could affect the cement bond. If there is a weak point in that, then you could potentially have the frac fluids and or the oil or gas that you're producing leak up the outside of the casing and get into your groundwater table. That's where the problem can happen downhole. And on surface, you have to be careful because all of these fluids that you pump down the hole can come back. They come back to surface. So then you have a bunch of options of what you do with that fluid when it comes back to surface. You can pump it down a disposal well, which is common in the U.S., and out west, all of the production water and conventional production is pumped down other holes as well. Or you can reuse that fluid, which is great too, because that means you're not taking any more fresh water out of the system. You get to continue to reuse those fluids. So they're the two places where you got to really have strong legislation in place. And there's actually a statistic. I did a little bit of research earlier that one association said that to properly monitor fracking, and it's the whole process from start to finish, would increase the cost of a well by 7%.
A well spent 7%.
Oh, it definitely is,
Listen, Jay, I really appreciate this. You've answered a lot of my questions, and if I have any more, I'm going to reach out to you again. Thanks very much for coming on tonight and letting us know a little bit more of what fracking is all about and how it can be done safely.
No sweat.
Thanks, Jay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.